begin with the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you everyone for being here for the September 20th edition of the Public Safety Committee meeting of the Radnor Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Abel requested that we convene this meeting on flood safety issues, so I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Abel. Jake?
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Clark. I appreciate your continued leadership on this issue, which was evident when I proposed holding this meeting, and there was no hesitation on your part. I also want to thank the members of the Township staff who are here tonight, representatives from the police department and fire departments, as well as residents who are here this evening to engage in this important discussion. As commissioners, we have no greater responsibility than ensuring the safety of our residents. Whether it be the safety on the roads, trucks clearing our bridges, or keeping residents safe during major storms, we have a responsibility to act when we identify a need to protect the community. On August 13th, 2018, Radnor experienced an incredible storm, which saw flooding throughout the township. The water was unforgiving, moving cars, tearing up asphalt roads, and entering households uninvited. Historic storms like the one on August 13th that dumped 6 inches of rain in an hour often become a bullet point for those favoring spending millions on stormwater projects. However, it is my understanding from talking to experts in this area that no amount of money would have prevented flooding that day. So I want to emphasize that this meeting is not about stormwater projects. What we did here at the special Board of Commissioners meeting held on August 20th was from a number of residents who raised safety concerns during that storm. One neighbor talked about the threat of her child going out to move his or her car just minutes before the flash flood raced down their street. Another resident questioned what would have happened had their children been waiting for the bus when the flash floods occurred. And a third resident indicated that they did not see a first responder on their street during the entirety of the storm. This latter comment I don't believe to be accurate, but still that it was made is concerning to me. Saving human lives, protecting personal property, and forward positioning resources do not require millions of dollars, multiple studies, and years of inaction. We can do this now. We should be doing this now. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I'm asking that we start the dialogue. Actually, I'm asking that we continue the dialogue. You know, a couple weeks ago, with Hurricane Florence swirling in the Atlantic, I sat down with the township manager and stressed the importance of providing residents parking options so that they have another location to park their vehicles if they believe their street would be flooded. To the township's credit and to the manager's credit, he responded immediately by waiving parking fees at the North Wing lot. This is a low-cost initiative and increases public safety immediately. Remember, it is easier to move people and vehicles than it is to move the flow of water. Here are some other areas where I think we should focus. Flood zones. And I believe we should identify roads that are prone to flooding and prohibit parking on these streets during major periods of rainfall. If residents don't want to see cars floating in downtown Wayne around the post office and middle school, then we should not allow parking there during major storms. In addition to opening up the North Wayne lot, I'd also request that we waive all parking throughout the Wayne Business District and allow residents to park there when we think there's a flood occurring. Second area is street restrictions. We have amazing first responders, but they are tested unnecessarily during these big storms. There's technology available to restrict access to flood-prone roads when water rises to a specified level. I stood on South Wayne Avenue during another storm on September 8th and watched vehicles struggle to make it through the flash floods along that road. If we were to have an arm or some other mechanism on West Wayne and another on Runnymede, we would deter drivers from attempting to bowl through these flood-prone areas. Training and equipment. I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners to utilize the Stormwater Fund, which is paid into by all residents, to support additional water safety training and rescue equipment for our first responders. I look forward to hearing from representatives of the police and fire departments this evening, but I'm confident that they would benefit from additional training and equipment to support flood rescues. Again, we're not talking millions of dollars, but we're talking about funding resources that would pay immediate dividends. So after listening to residents on August 20th, there is a definite need, I believe, to look at public safety issues. I've listed a couple areas where I believe we can focus and where we can make a difference, but I know it's not a comprehensive comprehensive list. We may need to create an emergency public safety commission made up of representatives from this subcommittee, township staff, police and fire departments, as well as the school district to further discuss these items and create a comprehensive flood safety plan. Again, I want to thank Commissioner Clark for his leadership on this issue and look forward to working with him and others to make our residents and community safer. Thank you.
I think that's well said. I think those are good ideas. Something I'd like to certainly hear from the staff and the experts about. Sean, do you have any thoughts on it?
I actually want to let the experts weigh in, and then I'll probably kind of formulate an opinion there.
All right, sounds good. All right, with that, I guess Mr. Z.
Well, I want to thank the committee here for continuing to take this dialogue up. This is something that we've been doing for the last 8 years. We've had great responses, great communication on storms we know in advance, whether they're hurricanes, any kind of snow event, weather events. With Sergeant Smith, who does an excellent job as our EOC, we pre-meet prior to any of these storms and put a lot of mechanisms in place, information, communication, to be able to get a lot of these things out. The response and communication amongst all the safety forces here have been excellent. Again, on those storms we know are coming, we'd be able to put out barricades, blocking areas. They're already established. We have to where emergency generators are set up, shelter. If we have public works where they have to stay, we come in advance of the storm to make sure we keep areas open, drainage areas open. The response to George and his coordination here between all departments and divisions of what streets are being blocked and trying to communicate that information out. And George is probably second to none in this area of how well he does in being able to set that up in advance. The challenges we run into are those storms that we don't know are coming, or the level of water that's going to come. We've had several storm events. I can go back to October of 10, and then we've had a multitude of storms since there where it's just calling for regular rain, and all of a sudden these, I'll call them supercells, crop up, and then we end up like we did August 13th and how to respond from those. So it's something that we have done, we've practiced well. I think the continued support of the commissioners will be definitely needed here as we look at your direction on how you want to proceed in these particular areas. We're here, I tell you, from all the stuff, how they kick in to handle phones, how it's scheduled in advance of all these storms. The detail is quite remarkable. And during the event, the operation of how that dialogue works and staffing the field. And George is one that has always reminded that you can't have people working 28, 30 hours. Those have to be spelled and rotated. And we are probably one of the only communities that actually keep our switchboard open around the clock during these storm events. There are a number of communities that do not keep their switchboard open so residents have access. We are probably one of the few communities that actually have a tree service that actually is with us for the entire storm. And when trees come down, we can open up roads quickly. The challenges with PICO, we're trying to get them out here to try to restore power. The challenge is also, too, is as we barricade a lot of these streets, I'm not sure if people think that's like the finish line, where you can just take your car and drive through the police line, do not cross, where they break right through the tape. We have individuals that decide they're going to stand 5 feet from a power line that's down and have a conversation. Steve Narcidi and I actually had to talk to a few people who were standing literally, I think, 5 feet away from a down power line. So I think there's a big educational component that we need to do. I know I received some information today from PICO on their promotional piece, and I'll make sure that I get this out to you, about power safety, what to do, what not to do. They've also implemented their storm center, which is actually a website or a screen you can go to, and you can actually layer by the mouse that's on there, actually put it over a particular area. They will tell you, so if you scroll over Radnor Township, it'll tell you how many customers are out and a tentative restore time. I'm not sure all of you how that's going, but I don't remember. It's gone to 4 hours to where it's undetermined. But at least they're putting different tools in place to try to assist with calls. So we're appreciative of this meeting here to be able to continue the dialogue on what we can do and the support for that.
if I could add 2 questions on a
Sure.
couple comments. And again, I want to thank all the first responders and staff for everything that they do during storms. I think residents appreciate it, and they know everyone's out there working hard. You talked about storms that we don't know about, the surprise storms. Is this an area where we can look at technology? The surprise storm comes, like I said, it's September 8th, I'm sitting down there on Southland Avenue, and all of a sudden, Southland Avenue is flooded. Cars are still trying to go through. If they have nowhere to go, they're not going to try to go through that area. So, is technology an option to help increase safety of the residents and the first responders, because they don't need to be going unnecessarily in there?
Absolutely. Anything that can be utilized would be great. It's actually people putting in place, because I know there was even conversation this afternoon. At what point do you drive your car in the water when it's starting to come up over the hood of the car? When do you stop driving? I mean, those are some of the things that are interesting, but anything that can be utilized, yes, technology can definitely assist.
Second comment is on the storms we know are coming. We've had this conversation. Large rainfall. I know that West Wayne is going to flood underneath the bridge. So if we had a plan in place where you knew, big hurricane's coming, it's hitting, it's not like Florence and it goes off in a different direction, it just trips the plan, and then you just barricade it, and if it misses, you may have some residents that are unhappy, but you have it in place so you free up the resources to be other places in the township to help out. Because I'm sure there's areas in the township besides West Wayne under the bridge that are going to flood.
Wawa. We had the Wawa first. We go to the firehouse next. The bridge is a bad one because that gets deep under there, under the West Wayne Bridge. We always have the trucks loaded. The PD calls us. We got the TAC radio. They're in touch with us. We close the roads, the barricades, just like the boss said. They're all ready to go. When we know it's coming. That one caught us off guard.
Right. So those are the types of issues that I'd like to continue to have a dialogue on to see if we can get to a place, the plan, you just follow through on the plan, and then you have extra resources where bigger problems are arising throughout the community.
Can I just ask a follow-up? So you do close streets when there's a big storm coming, is that true? So you'll preemptively do it?
Not until actually water or snow's coming out of the air. Because
Okay.
sometimes if we block them off ahead of time and nothing occurs, we will have people just driving through,
Mhm.
around, moving barricades, all of that. To come up to something more of a permanent, like block type thing,
Mhm.
would be helpful, because we've seen it where they just move stuff out of the way. Or they'll drive through caution tape when it gets too bad. They will just drive right through it.
So, Commissioner Abel, can I direct a question toward you?
So we get a lot of text from you and from the storm. What other additional forms of technology are you looking at?
Well, I think, and I'd like to hear from the first responders, but I believe there's technology out there that when water hits a certain level on a road, if you have an arm there, it would bring the arm down, or you could have a sign that would flash, road flooded, do not enter, do not cross. Sending me an email isn't preventing drivers from going through these flooded areas and or cars parking in those areas. So if we know that there's going to be flooded, we know if we know the roads are going to flood, or if there's a surprise storm and the roads are flooding, we should have options in place to make residents safer, make our first responders safer, as well as our staff, because we have public works out there in the middle of this. And I'm sure if one of your people saw a car stranded in a flooded area, they're going to jump in and help. And they have no training. They don't have the right equipment, but they do it because they believe in supporting the community. So I think to make everybody safer, we need to look at all these different options.
Do you want to let the first responders go, or talk, and then I have more questions, but that's fine.
Sure.
A lot of these events that you talk of are pre-plannable. This organization from the top down has supported emergency management. The idea is that the technology are great. Technology fails, just like stop signs. They're supposed to work great. Floodwaters are floodwaters. And we've had cars stopped and flooded, and cars would still go back in. So if you're going to invest the money, you should think about education. Some signage is good. Specifically for South Wayne Avenue, a state road, I would find it very difficult that the state would sign off on having some kind of barrier put up. Public Works has done a great job on the events. I worked August 13th, so instead of being in charge of the EOC, I was out running the road, going call to call, street to street, and trying to help the people that drove into flooded road. They're going to do that because they think they can make it. That is an educational aspect of it. We collectively want the residents of Radnor Township to be safe. We try the best we can within budget constraints. You know, every dollar matters in this organization. Would I love to have more money for EM? Yes, I would, but I understand there's a bigger pie and many other things that take priority until a storm like that hits. As preparation is, I know of no other organization as prepared as ours. Yes, I'm vetted in this organization, a part of the response, but the support from the township manager and the board is second to none in this area. And I empathize with what's being brought up from your constituents. It seems very logical and very succinct and straightforward to have an arm that came down and would automatically do that. But then there's maintenance, then upkeep, and then just the regular day-to-day traffic that goes around, juvenile activity. All of these things snowball into costs that people do not forecast. And believe me, you'll find no bigger person supporting technology. But some of these things are educational based, and some of these things are just rock and mortar with the barriers. And the cost effectiveness really comes into play there. There may be better, as I said earlier, better money spent educating the public, some proper signage, and go along with what you were saying about let's post some flood routes. And when rain falls, this road floods, turn around, don't drown. That is a national program that works. In Carolina and the South, people pay attention to it because less than 4 inches of rain water on the road will float a 3,000-pound car. And we just need to educate our people, our township residents, and those that traverse the streets a little bit better that will happen. It's pure physics. And we're not going to defeat that with money, technology, or anything. It's education that's going to help that. Again, one man's opinion that runs the EOC that has seen storm after storm in here. We can dictate where those areas are flooding. We know those. FEMA maps show it, and they're consistent. This 27 years, that's the worst flood I've seen. So you're going to have those 1,000-year storms. The frequency may increase, it may not increase, but that's what we're looking at. And luckily, we had no loss of life. All of the property can be replaced. The loss of life is what we should be talking about. And education and the proper equipment for first responders to help those that aren't educated are a good first step to take.
Yeah, and you were talking about the storms. At least my neighbors that I talked to on Midland Avenue and St. David's Road in that area, they said their basements have always flooded. I mean, there used to be a pond, I think. But they said it's getting worse. So, you know, that's their complaint. It's not necessarily that it happens. They knew that, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. So they're exactly right. I think there's part of this is a bigger issue, but that's not for tonight's discussion.
And
so.
if I may just add, there is no doubt it's a bigger issue, but the EM side, this township is second to none.
Sure.
All the stormwater issues from the EM world, I'm here to comment on that. We know where it floods. The PW, Public Works, does a great job supporting PD and fire. Fire does an excellent job responding when necessary. Those pillars are in place.
Sure.
And again, what we're imploring is residents in the neighborhood register on our alert system so we can pinpoint the alerts. Those alerts work great if we have addresses because then we can geocode the address for flood warnings. And that's what our main impetus is going to be now. We want people to use our website, register, but also put their addresses, not just their emails. Their addresses are extremely important because our old system was detailed where flood zone 1, flood zone 2, flood zone 3, all the way up to 7, we could send out a text call, an email, and a regular call and alert the people, and that's what we want to get back to.
What's the turnaround time? I mean, when you have flash flooding, it comes. So what's the turnaround time where you know where you can get a text out, or when it's already, hey, it's 3 feet of water, I can't get to my car?
We can get them out immediately. I can call our IT people from the road, tell them what I want, the message to go out, and it can be sent immediately. There are staff in the police department that have the same access, that we can generate messages. You've seen the theft alerts in the area. It's the same premise. This would only be large rain coming through, expect flooding in the usual areas. That's why we would like to pinpoint those areas again and get it out to your constituents. Go on our website, register for Civic Ready, and put your address in. If you've already done it, do it again, and you'll only get the one text message or the one email because the new information just goes right over the other. It fills in the blanks.
Could you do a segmented reverse 911?
Reverse 911?
Yeah, as well.
It's just not as fluid and readily accessible
On top of
as
that
us.
as well,
Yes.
when it comes to situations such
Yes,
as...
if need be, we can go along that way. And we're also IPAL certified that we can, in a national emergency or an emergency, we can do the same exact thing, push the information out. It's been, and I don't want to speak for the township manager, the philosophy here to push out the information to have the residents make informed decisions. It's great for me to sit in the EOC and say, yes, you should vacate your property and go someplace else. But there are the people that know, the people in Briarwood, the people down off Bromore Avenue where it really floods, the people on Plant Avenue, all of those areas that flood. They've gone through it many more times than I have. They know what they can stay. They know what, this is a little bit crazier than normal. I need to get out of here. Until there's a proper declaration from the governor and down that mandates mandatory evacuation, it's on the people, and we try to supply the information to them. Every little bit helps. Addresses help, phone numbers help, text messages help, all of those things. Those technologies that you talk about are in place now. We just need to yoke the strength and make them much more efficient. And obviously you're very active in your communities. The more you get it out to your constituents, the better it is for us. We can say so much. We can do our 411 segments. We can put it on the scroll. But word of mouth is something that pays dividends.
One thing to add, just to George's point, is you can register for the National Weather Service. I know some people don't like when we've gotten phone calls. The one that went out from the National Weather Service about the day in advance at 3 in the morning, there's going to be a heat warning. I think most people said, get me off the system, because why at 3 o'clock in the morning? But the other ones like flash flood watch, flash flood warning, those help. There were folks that I know that when the tornadoes, when we had tornado warnings, there were some people said, I don't want that wake-up call at 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning. Is there a way to pinpoint? So that's something that, that technology can help. How do you massage that message that they can get it out? But like George says, we can actually circle an area and actually send that information out. So if there's a certain street or certain areas, we do have that ability to be able to do that.
Obviously, the FEMA flood maps. That's one of the primary things we use. We outline that area and all the houses in that area. We'd like to have all that information. That way, they get first warning. It makes sense because they're the ones directly impacted.
So at the August 20th special meeting, when a resident says that they were concerned when their child went out to move their car, if the flash floods would have been a few minutes earlier, they would have been caught up in it. Do you think it makes sense to create flood zones so when you know these areas are going to flood, we don't have to have that situation? You provide a place where cars can park, so people aren't going out to try to move their cars last minute. They're already pre-positioned.
If you let us just go through this real quick, there's a couple steps, because I think what you're talking about is steps and stages and opportunities to avoid conflict. And I think the fire company, talked to Mike McGuire, they share the same philosophy that the more we reduce having the emergencies than the bigger emergencies that sometimes are going to happen no matter what intentions go through. So just let me go through this because I think it'll cover some of the stuff. Mr. Zinkowski requested that we just do a quick recap of some of the things that were going on, and I appreciate Sean Deidre doing it. Obviously, just to the residents who are watching this township, the police department, everybody's very concerned about what happened, and we feel bad for all the people who received damage, lost cars, and many other things, because that really hits them hard, and there is a major impact to that. So to our residents and businesses, everybody at this table really cares, and that's why they're here. Obviously, we know what happened on our storm. We had over 100 police calls for service. Some of them weren't even documented. I think the number's probably higher in less than an hour. And the fire company and police department responded to over 28 water rescues. As always, there's power and road closures, and obviously we all know about the significant level of damage. We used to try to get some studies done on flooding and some other things, but over the past 20 years, we use this that, I think Joe McGuire may be the most senior guy here, but all of us have stories over the flooding, and some of the things are measurable, and some of the things change over the 20 years. So when we have one plan, we have to stay dynamic and continue to improve. In the Radnor Police Department, since I've been here, we've ruined 4 police cars due to these floods, including one right out front of the building. And so we are a part of that where we know that happens. We have flooding in those respective areas. It's not just isolated to one area, but to families and stuff that get flooded out, they think about that one area only, and I understand why. But we have this global approach to it, and that's why we have a team sitting here. Some locations that never flooded before have changed due to our development, whether they're known reasons or unknown reasons. Police, fire, EMS, public works, emergency management now, which is a newer part, people must respond and meet these challenges. And obviously we know that water is a very unforgiving and very dangerous situation. And I do use that there was a recreational activity a couple years ago where a child was significantly injured due to playing, if you will, in the water. So it's not just cars and other things, it's a very important thing, and obviously cars and homes seem to take the main part of it. With the team here, the planning, the township manager's directed, and what we are working on, and also what you are now putting on the table is some of new initiatives. I think one of the keys is to collect information from everybody. The 20th meeting where people brought up different things, their perceptions, whether real or not, and the level of damage, which Sergeant Smith and his EOC role is really coordinating all of the total value of that. So we're not 100% done. Need to bring all the stakeholders that are here to the table, and that should include our citizens, local civic groups as well. We hit on this, but I think we'll stress it again, that public education is a key. And we have 2 components. One, we have visitors that come to the township, and then we have people who are used to many of the different things that everybody does. So there's 2 parts to that, but public education can't be underestimated, and the county even tries to do that, especially the safety tips, and George mentioned the one. And then share plans with everybody in the township, whether you're a public safety professional or not. Increasing the strategies, I think we've done an assessment. We're training. We quickly briefed the manager on some of the significant water rescues that the fire company handled. There were some secondary ones that our people needed to handle and help assist. So use an example that we need to have training, which we are bringing in. We need to have better equipment for the police department and the public works division. The fire company is going to talk about their equipment and their needs. Mr. Zinkowski authorized out of budget, and I appreciate it, sir, very much, to start getting water rescue vests coming in so that we are better prepared tomorrow if something happens. You still have to have training. You can't just buy stuff and think that you're safe. But we are taking immediate action steps that another storm comes along, we will be better prepared. Training for all the township staff who assist in the storm, disaster recovery. Fire companies are really good at that. Townships are not as strong in that because they have so many other duties. We're going to try and catch up with some of the training that they have. Review our emergency communication system because we want to milk as much from it as possible. I think we have some very good technology and some real teamwork, but we're talking about what George reviewed with you and what your concern was. How can we better utilize every piece of technology we have here and strengthen that so it's as effective as possible. Just some issues to review. You brought up with the water road closures. I think that's a very good thing. Mr. Z has brought that up many times, and actually he really started off when he arrived here about snow emergency roads. But I think getting the township to create an ordinance that we can move cars out whether they want to or not, to avoid them floating, going mobile, blocking fire trucks and all the things that can go on with a floating car. There is a company called Tapco that has they actually just came out with it. Steve and Orsino are looking at it. It's a solar powered sign, and it actually has a water sensor inside the base. So it would be something that would go off. I don't know if we could close the roads, to Steve's point and George's point with the state roads, but we certainly can have some things that may alert the person who is not really paying attention to water. There is no question, and I'll ask the fire company their opinion, in the dark it is much harder to see a water line. It is not as easy as one would think. During the daytime you have a lot better opportunity of sight. So that's something that's plagued people for many times, and our police cars, most of them were sunk in the dark. Vehicles that can drive through high water. I know Mike McGuire is going to make a presentation on that. I also think we should possibly look at military surplus, which costs a lot less, so that we can basically drive up there and get that person who said they never saw us. I will say to those residents, the fire department, the EMS, and the police and the public works were everywhere, but could we drive up every street? Absolutely not. They were over flooded. So there is a perception of that, but nobody was ever without 911 service from any of the people represented here. Some people who want to help close roads when they flood and do some other thing, I think that's a great idea. We had a resident who wanted to volunteer to help. We gave him a roll of yellow tape. So we actually did something. We're not asking anybody to get involved in rescue, but start to talk to people about different ways that they could help their own neighborhood, sort of that town watch concept, but for floods. And that was just some of the things that we had as the police department. There's just a couple pictures to kind of remind everybody of some unique flooding that obviously occurred. The bottom right is out front of the police department, which actually got us stuck. We had four or five officers who could not get out, to provide services because the flash flooded over the line and we weren't able to exit our own building.
Do we utilize the township, the Citizens Police Academy, the graduates of that?
I would say that so the answer is yes, but in this situation, this happened so quick, there was no time to do that. And to be honest with you, we would, correct me if I'm wrong, we probably would have told them not to traverse the roads. They're better once they get here and help us.
But not in a surprise storm, but in a storm that you know is coming and you're preparing for it. Would you utilize them to block roads off so you have the police force and fire department focused on other issues?
What I would say is we would use any personnel to free up fire and police. That's something we try and do. Like, we have a lot of wires calls on sometimes, so we try and get the fire company out of there so they're available for a building fire, and we'll have the police sit there. Then the second phase is we get a hold of Steve McNellis' guys, say, listen, we want to free the cops up, and then they bring barricades. So we kind of have a three-tiered system, and whoever gets there first takes the responsibility, and then we build back. Our citizen volunteers are used. We have to be very careful of their safety as well, even though they do have training, so we use them in very particular ways.
They're helpful where if they have to work within here, because this building does open up for overnight in case the power outage is either too hot, too cold. At times that we've had where Villanova has provided meals for all the first responders in these storms. So I see them being that support, which would allow and release staff, police staff, for that out from within this building here. I can see that being, I think, very beneficial that way.
One of the biggest things is rescue, but I just think while we touch on those topics, I could let the fire companies, as they both did a dramatic amount of work for us on that day, and just let them touch base on the actual rescue component and the dangers that they observe. Mike and Danny.
Thank you again for having us. I just wanted to make one point that was brought up in a couple Board of Commissioners meetings before, just to make quite clear. There was an accusation that Radnor Fire Company couldn't meet some of the response times because of certain flooded roads on North Wayne Avenue. Yes, obviously we know North Wayne floods from Eagle south back to about Poplar. At no time did Radnor not make it to any calls or miss any calls for service during that time. So the statement that was made early on was not accurate at all. So I just wanted to touch on that first and foremost. Some of the things that were brought up by the chief, I completely agree with and wholeheartedly support. I do believe we should look for a deuce and a half or a 5-ton vehicle, one if not two, for calls for service for just traversing a lot of the roads. Public Works, Fire, EMS especially. You know, we could throw a stretcher on the back of one of them. You could put a small skid pump on one of them. If you had a fire, you know, people say Poplar Avenue, 100 block floods like crazy, but fire's not going to stop in there. You know, we might lose a house or two because we can't get down that road. So I completely agree. We need some larger vehicles in town. As far as the signs, I do completely agree with them as well. South Wayne Avenue, Lancaster Avenue might have some problems because of them being state roads, but West Wayne and Highland, Banbury at Wawa, I've got quite a list. You know, Plant and Willow, there's a ton that we could do. You know, Lower Marion has a very simple system down at the Ford. They have a gated system where a police officer of Public Works goes up, unlocks the master lock, swings the gate closed, locks it, and they're done. You know, I wasn't aware of the solar system. I think we spoke last week about an electronic system. That's all well and good, but again, it was alluded to, and we lose power, we have nothing to go on. Sometimes simple is better, you know, KISS. If the solar system would hold and the sensors would work, absolutely. But I think anything like a road closure, permanent road closure would be great. Steve's crew does an amazing job, but they can only put up so many barricades, and we only have so many guys. And with that, they could close South Wayne Avenue, and in 10 minutes, there's more water coming across the post office, and the barricades just get washed away. And again, to the point of education, I completely agree. They say if you can't see the WL line, I've been through a lot of water rescue training, and they say if you can't see the line, you should not drive over it. I mean, it's very simple. Lieutenant Dietrich shared a story with me tonight that he and another officer tried to make a rescue down off Fenimore a couple weeks ago, and they made it up to just about mid-thigh, and he could feel himself really getting pushed. Rescuers who are not equipped with a full rescue suit should not be in anything above their knees for fear of you know, being swept away. We spoke about their duty gear. You know, if he needs to go in and make a rescue, he's going to take a couple extra minutes. He's going to have to shed his duty belt, his $2,000 radio, his handgun. You know, he's got to secure that. So there's a lot that does play into it. I think this is a great start, but I do agree with the chief that two big things we could go with is certainly equipment, big vehicles, more water rescue equipment for the police, fire, and EMS, and certainly a lot of signage.
You said a deuce and a half or a 5-ton. I assume those are two different vehicles. One's twice as big as the other.
Both,
roughly.
Not really, but yes, they're just two different. They're military surplus vehicles, and like the chief alluded to, they are eligible for them. I'm not saying we need a fleet of them, but one or two of them would be phenomenal. They can travel in approximately 4 feet of water. Their air intakes and their stacks are up probably 10 feet in the air. We would have to watch certain bridges, but wait for that. But
the issue we have with the fire trucks, even though the fire trucks are higher off the ground than automobiles are, the air intake is still low enough that if the water's deep enough, we have a problem. I can attest to the fact of driving our ladder truck through North Wayne Avenue one night where he said you can't see the water line at nighttime. And it wasn't until I was starting to go into it when I realized what it was. And basically at that point, I just had to keep my foot on the gas. Hope I can make it through, and I made it through the other side before the truck died. So, you know, there are some advantages to having something with a lot higher clearance on it.
And again, too, you know, we got six inches of water, but there's times it might be an inch of water. It just depends on how quickly it's falling. The storm sewers, they just can't keep up. You know, a lot of times we can't get to the firehouse. It's going to take extra time to get there. We don't have staffing in ahead of time, and we're all pretty good about it, and the police officers can attest. We'll back fire trucks up, put police cars in, get them safe, you know, get out of the water. We send messages out early on, hey, I need a standby crew in station in case we start to get things. Now, as soon as we do that, we never have anything, but, you know, we do that, try to get it ahead of time. And like they said, you know, we barricade a road off early. Well, it's kind of like crying wolf, you know, they're going to drive around it, and, you know, if it can happen, it's going to, so.
In a flooded situation, do you feel like your crew has everything they need to go in the water if you don't know what exactly is in the water? So if systems are backing up,
so
would there be a reason why you wouldn't put a person in the water because you don't have the right equipment?
Absolutely.
Midland Avenue, St. David's Avenue are two that we would not, because the manholes blow off and they move down the street, which I know Public Works, when I saw Steve Amering, the manhole's gone. So basically, even though the water was deep, you don't know that there's actually an open manhole because it went. So I think that's some of the concerns of where you can't go in that deep water, because those two streets have a habit of popping up the manholes and taking off down the street.
So
I'm also talking about, you know, oil, gas.
So I was, yeah,
CNG
one of the issues that we run into more than anything else, there are physical hazards like missing manhole covers. When water's thick and heavy and it's coming in with all kinds of debris in it, we don't know what it's carrying along with it. Biological hazards, sewers back up and start running into the floodwaters, down power lines that we can't see. Even something as simple as a tree log that's underneath the water that we can't see. If, we're putting a rescuer into the water, they trip and fall. Next thing you know, they're 100 yards downstream trying to catch up and hold on to their rescue rope and pull themselves back in. Without certain things like wetsuits, dry suits, we're asking our volunteers to go in shorts and t-shirts and bring an old pair of sneakers with you. We have flotation devices, we have helmets, we go through training, so our volunteers, our firefighters, EMS crews, they know what to do, but a lot of the times we don't have exactly what we would need to effect those rescues. One of the other things to consider is not just the rescuers, but the victims. We have all of this gear on, and we're asking somebody to step out of their car or their house with almost nothing. We'll provide them with a flotation device and a helmet. Sometimes that's not enough. Even something as simple as having a small inflatable raft, something like that, not powered, just a raft that we can put them in and carry them to safety might be helpful also.
And this is just a picture behind it that you started off with. There are two of our fire company people, one of them actually being Ryan in the khaki shorts. They are shorts that he's wearing back there. And then one of our career staff up at the car right here in front of the police station.
So when we enter water, 95% of our guys are trained to an awareness level. And with that is what's considered a shore-based or road-based rescue. They deploy throw bags, ring buoys, things like that. I'm the only one that has like a swift water certification to actually make rescues. We would like to get all of our guys certified up to the swift water, the WRER level. I know the chief here has worked with the superintendent already getting water rescue supplies. We brought the rest of them in last night, as a matter of fact. We're working on an awareness class for the police, and even if they want to advance it further, we'd like to have a team. There's talk of us and Berwyn kind of merging together. We all get flooded at the same time, but being able to utilize each other's. Ryan spoke about a raft. I think that's a very good idea. We have a lot of elderly residents that can't transverse water. We had a situation on Poplar Avenue many years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, where we needed to carry a powered wheelchair out because this individual could not move without the chair. Things like that would help us. When we do enter water, we do sound water just like we would a roof. We have specialized poles that we're sounding, and like I said, I have a little more training, so I can do a little more, but I can't enter it by myself. So
I appreciate that. For training for an individual, roughly, what's the cost on that?
An awareness class for up to 30 people. I happen to have those numbers because I was helping the police department with it. We get 30 people in an awareness class for approximately $400. And again, that is an awareness class. It's a shore-based rescue. And the fire department, as well as that offered to the police department, it would be more of a shore-based rescue. How to deploy throw bags, how to set up a ring buoy system, how to make rescues from a bridge. Some of our guys will use the aerial truck and we'll stretch out and we'll pluck people off cars like that, just because it is safer, which turns into the superintendent's idea of having larger vehicles. More advanced training would go into, you would need the rescue gear. To outfit one person is approximately $1,500, and just to put that into perspective, to put someone in a full set of fire gear is approximately $12,000. So it's considerably less, still expensive. The class itself, to put approximately 20 in at a time, would be about $2,000 for the instructor. We've already reached out to the Radnor Township School District to get into the pool. With that class becomes an actual swim test. You have to pass a swim test. You have to be very proficient with the subject at hand. We actually go over to the Scuba River where Gladwin trains, and you do rescues from the river in some current. So you get some pretty good practical experience.
So, Jake, you want to fund a lot of this because it seems expensive. How much are one of those surplus trucks?
Chris,
do you have an idea?
Chris has prices.
Probably with the budget, what I like to do is if you guys want to move forward, I think what we would do is we would team up. I hate using this word, but offline, get these numbers together. The township, because we're a municipality, we signed up a couple of years ago to potentially get almost free. And as the finance director always reminds me, nothing's 100% free, but it would be dramatically reduced, where in other words, one of those new trucks could cost up to $125,000. There's a chance we could get it either completely free or under, $7,000. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into that. There's different needs and other things that go into it. Michael has been doing a lot of work, buying different stuff, and assisting Sergeant McGuire, who's the Radnor chief, is getting us up to speed for just having our people at the baseline level. And then we could break up the different levels so you guys have an understanding of what basically the
Well,
total
the budget's
cost.
coming out soon, so I'd love to see that. Commissioner Abel, you said you would like to see the township using stormwater management money to help fund some of this. Could you kind of elaborate on that?
Well, we have over $3 million currently in the stormwater fund. All residents pay into the fund, and the ideas we're talking about in this dialogue benefit all residents. So I think this is a perfect segue to use the funds to have equipment, have training, and have a community that's ready to respond to them if they are caught in a situation. I think it makes sense to use some of this funding for equipment, training, technology if it's available, or just other options that increase safety for the residents.
I've looked at this. I've discussed this actually with people that are affected that live in Wayne. I guess I always like to see low budget items first, and then obviously if we need to get a military truck, that's great. But let's try to see what we're not doing and do that and see if that makes a difference. It's the incremental things. A quick story, Mike Schmidt was a 264 lifetime batting average. Said if he got 2 more hits a week, he would have been at 300 career batting average. So it's the tiny little incremental things that make all the difference in the world. So I think, and I don't know if we could do this, but signage all over saying this is a floodplain, park at your own risk, letting people know the risk. I drive up and down the streets and I see the storm sewers constantly full of debris. I don't know what it's like inside of that. So when it comes to our public works department, instead of, if we know that we're having a storm ahead of time, like a hurricane or something, to kind of snake what we can snake and kind of get that low-lying fruit. And if they're driving around, the trash guys or whomever, and they see that there's debris covering some of these grates, clean them up. So it's kind of what I like to see, the little things. And I don't know, I'm not an expert in drainage or stormwater and all this other stuff, but I think that it would probably start with our public works as well as our police as well as the residents to keep our eyes out and say, hey, this could be a problem. So that's number one. And then the other thing is the technology. So if we can push this stuff out almost immediately, and you can get a text like, hey, move your car, it's going to flood, or hey, there's a supercell. I think that's the most important thing. I think, Bob, you're right, where you get so many of these messages and so many of these emails, it's like almost like crying wolf. Which one do I read? Which one don't I read? So I think that if you could, as you said, massage that, I think, just my opinion, I think that's going to be really helpful as well. So starting there and then kind of building up to see what it is, but you can't prevent these storms. So the other thing I would like to see is we had 7 inches of rain. What's the worst case scenario? Say 15, double it. And if you could do where all the floodplains are, where it floods, what the emergency routes are, but stuff that's kind of low budget as opposed to just trying to throw money at the problem. Yeah, we have a truck and it's got multiple purposes. It can help with a lot of things. And it's not that I'm against it. I'm just, there's a million great ideas. What
where do we put this money? Because we have a limited amount of money. And these are great ideas that I'm hearing. So that's kind of how I view this. It's great that we started a dialogue. I think it's wonderful that, this was brought up. But just kind of how I see, just kind of funneling back and going from there.
I think, to your point, Sean, I think we did talk about some low budget items, and I commended the township manager for opening up North Point Lot. Zero cost, 100% benefit if there's a huge storm and residents heed the warning and they park there. Then they're off the street. You're not worried about them in harm's way trying to move their cars last minute. They're pre-positioned and they're ready to go. That's a good use of that area, the highland, and it benefits the residents. I think we heard from the fire department. I don't think training for 30 people at $400 is a high budget item. I think that is sensible, and I think it's also sensible that we start looking and we listen to what they're saying, that there's times when they're not getting in the water. And so if we're going to wait till something happens and they're going to come back and say, we didn't feel safe getting in there, and unfortunately, an injury or a casualty or something takes place when it could have been prevented had they had the proper equipment and proper training, I think we need to have a hard and a long discussion about where we put our priorities.
If I can just dovetail on that, on North Wayne Avenue, and helping to block one of the streets there in that storm, there were people walking through the water, where again, as common sense tells you, water is flowing across the street, and they just decided they're going to walk anyhow. Actually, myself and one of the residents were yelling, saying, do not walk through this, do not walk through, and they continued to walk through. These are the ones where, again, the water rescue, where Public Works is out there, the training, that everybody can have, one, for their own safety, to know that, okay, don't jump in there, because that, I think the natural reaction is, no, I want to help. But you could actually be putting yourself in more jeopardy by doing that, where if the training is there, and we have that for everybody, and they will realize themselves first, and then...
And just one more comment on that. So with the stormwater fund, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we have no projects in 4 years. What the chief is talking about is $7,000 for a truck that we know we're going to get use out of at some point. And we actually have something that results from it.
Well, that's if we can get it next to free, but as the other officer said, these stuff have maintenance. They give you the razor for free and you pay for the blades. So that's kind of how I look at it. Not to say that, look, if we can get the stuff for free and it just seems that there's a lot on there, but to be using our stormwater for it, and I know that we have a lot of good projects potentially in the pipeline. I believe Commissioner Larkin may be working with people from the state as well as Bob on doing. So I definitely want the situation so all of our residents are safe, without a doubt. But to raid our stormwater fund to pay for some of these, I don't know if that's we can do that. It's maybe a question for John Rice that we could talk about. I don't know if you have, but I don't know if the residents would, be happy with that.
I think residents would feel like we're working and doing something on their behalf, whereas the last 4 years they have nothing to show.
One other thing to bring up. We absolutely want to educate the residents of the township. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that they're safe. From our standpoint, emergencies happen no matter what. And mostly medical emergencies are usually the highest priority. Our vehicles can't get there to get to somebody. If we can't put people in the water to get to that person that's in need, we're taking on a huge liability that way. The other thing to kind of take into consideration is we also have hundreds, probably at least 100,000 plus non-residents that are in and out of the township during the day. So a lot of that education isn't going to a vast majority of the people that are in town during these storms. We need to have resources to be able to put boots on the ground and go out and handle emergencies, because and I'm sure the police officers, public works, everybody can back me up, it's gonna happen. And more often than not, the more we do to block up, put cones out, put flares out, put roadblocks up, it's like moths to a flame. People want to come see what's going on. You end up with 3 times as many people on an emergency scene than would have been there anyway. We need to be able to make sure we have what we need to handle those emergencies, those situations, keep ourselves safe, and keep the people that we're sworn to protect safe also.
Commissioner Abel, as a deputy chief of the fire department, as a township resident, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. I believe what also is discussed is reactionary versus progressive. I've been doing this for 24 years. You're more than welcome to come out and ride with us during a storm. You will see how understaffed, under-equipped we are. This isn't a list that we just pulled out of the sky, but the police department and fire department. This is something we're telling you we need to operate in this township at this particular time. So for it not to be funded, or you to kind of want to go low budget, really bothers me. More as a resident than anything else. You can't put if you're going to say $7,000 versus a light like you alluded to, then you're in the wrong spot.
I'm looking at low budget solutions first. I'm looking at.
So we have low budget now, and we're telling you it doesn't work.
I'm talking with our public works.
May I speak to that?
Yeah.
If you don't mind? My
Let me
name's Ginny.
just-
I live in, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Let me just, all I'm saying is that we need to look at what the low-lying fruit is. It's the incremental things of if you have a stop drainage. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that we shouldn't get or do any of this. I'm saying that there's a lot that's coming out here, and to get, you can't put a price on human life. I get that, but you need to put a price on all different things and all the, everything that we're going to do, because there's a certain cost to it. And if we could do everything that Commissioner Abel said, and it's in the budget, that's great. To raid the stormwater fee, I don't necessarily know that that's, that all the residents are going to be okay with that. So
I'm never going to be okay with anything, spending the money. You go to 5 residents, you talk to 5 different people, they're going to find 5 different answers for you.
Well, I think as part of this too is we've been very fortunate with these last couple storms. There's been 0 wind. But if you're out with all these gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen out in these storms, you hear the trees up above you cracking and swinging, and they're out doing this. The protection, and that for the first responders is really key in having the equipment. So it's those types of things that we need to factor into this, because if we added wind to this, we would have more issues of power outages, trees down that would have had to respond, which probably would have blocked first responders from trying to get to certain areas. And as part of this too, is part of the preparation that goes into it. Just to add to this, when these storms come, Steve will usually reach out and his inspectors to all the construction sites to say, like, Villanova, you need to get your big cranes down. Anybody who's got high equipment needs to put it down in anticipation of this date. Our health officials go out to the restaurants to make sure that they secure their outdoor furniture, outdoor dining furniture away, and then to make sure they run through it again. If power goes out, you have a backup generator for your food. Your food's only going to last this amount of time, so that we don't get restaurants that say, you know what, I'll just leave it here, and then all of a sudden, 5 days later, it's refrigerated again in advance that these areas, they will be back. So there's a lot else that goes on to this. And just in this last storm, we found out that, PennDOT, there are some drains that we're wondering what had happened. Actually, we found out, and Steve's guys did a great job, they have manholes that are on Lancaster Avenue that go to nowhere. It's a catch basin that's there, and then when I went to the camera, it goes 3 feet, and that's it. It connects to nothing. So it's like, what's going on? We know a lot of PennDOT's roads, the sewer lines, are not clean, and those are backed up, which we actually went and did them because we cannot afford to have that situation occur. What's going on there, that volume of water, and then, especially in your area, Jake, that water is heading down Conestoga Road. It's going to make that quick turnaround South Devon and go down there. So other areas that it's all comprehensive of how we try to go, because it's more and more things we find with PennDOT. That's an issue that I'd ask the board too to help, on that, to get them in part of this, because they've left it to the communities now. You take care of it, and then their budget looks great at the end of the year. Because they won't respond. If the trees cut down, we end up with these guys in that, because we can't allow state roads, Conestoga Road, South Lane, all the major state routes to be closed with trees. PennDOT will never show up. We'll be weeks before they show up. But these guys got to get them open for emergency vehicles to make sure they're getting through, as long as they're not tangled in the wires.
It's time and money well spent. I have no problem taking that on for PICO. It just has to be done. But I do think, in terms of not having spent money, the stormwater projects, I do think they're important. I would think about using the stormwater fund. My hesitancy would be these options, as Sean said, I think they're good options. They don't seem very expensive to me. I think we have the money. I mean, I think we have it in our general fund. I think we have to make it a priority to make sure they're included. I think everything Radnor Fire and everything Radnor PD said is correct. I think we all support that. I do think Radnor Fire made a good point. The level of the water, right? If you can see the lines, you shouldn't drive through it. My thought is that these stormwater projects, yes, they're going to cost millions and millions of dollars. They're going to come into play once every 3 years or 4 years, as we're seeing, but maybe they will have the water level be there, right, instead of at 4 feet. I don't know, but that would be my thought in trying to push those forward. And we keep trying to get these things moving, and I think we are turning the corner at this point. And Steve's got a good list of what we're doing. That's my thought on the stormwater projects. I know they won't solve the issue, but maybe they'll make them passable, these areas passable. Maybe South Wayne Ave will be passable by fire truck to get through it. I'm happy to spend the money to get to that point. I know it's not great. And I know the stormwater fund is not looked well upon by the public, and I'm sure, I actually think most people would probably say, yeah, use it, do something with it. No offense to the engineers, don't pay the engineers, and but
Consultants.
But we have projects. We've talked about this. We have areas, and we need to spend the money. It's invasive and it's going to be expensive. But I mean, we're going to do it on Midland. I keep saying this. I told the Banbury people the same thing. It's going to be invasive. It's going to be costly, but it needs to be done. I think it will help. So.
Just wanted to make sure the chief
I'd like to ask you, is there 2 or 5 major intersections you have a problem with water? I hear South Devon Avenue, I hear Midland, I hear...
South Wayne.
Why not the Lower Marine, the way they do it at the gates? Just close the things up a week, an hour ahead of time, nobody can... The gates closed, they locked, walk away from it. Yeah. It's a cheap way of doing it, but again, you have to get PennDOT involved, or whoever has to do it, approve whatever you do, or the property owners.
So if you're on South Wayne in that area, do you have to get PennDOT involved if you do it on Runnymede and West Wayne?
I think, and just to add, so the concern with PennDOT and the signs the superintendent brought up, I think we could meet with the people we need to meet with there. I'm not anticipating a huge pushback in the township, if it's the township funds that put signs that are, however we want to do it, activated by the height of the water, public safety at our firehouse in the center of town, or, I don't know if everybody's aware, there's a lot of plans. So for 7 years, I've been going out in storms all times of day and night. Bryn Mawr Avenue floods really badly.
Roberts Road is terrible.
A lot of people don't know that because all the, it's here.
Yeah.
So, I think we, if we spoke with PennDOT and said, here's the devices we wish to use, even if we get one road as a pilot, the township pays for it. I'm not trying to spend money, but the township pays for it. We say, hey, look, there's no cost to PennDOT. Let us try that, because it wouldn't be a problem. I can't envision it being a problem for them, because all we're saying is we want to keep people safe. And it's not an electric gate that goes down. It's a sign or something that's illuminated. So it's not. I'm not seeing that. And then on the township roads, you have carte blanche.
Subject to what, if you're putting in your residential properties.
Well, you have the ability to work within the right of way. Where you want to put it, some roads that don't have streetlights might not even appreciate having this sign. But
Sure.
I don't think that should be for all the many facets that was talked about today. I don't think that should be a big concern.
And you're just comment on some Commissioner Clark said. He was kind of about throwing money at some of the items we talked about that would be utilized by the township to help the residents. And I understand there's stormwater projects out there that are being talked about and that are important for neighborhoods. I think we can think creatively and have a discussion. Can we use 25% of annual stormwater, the annual stormwater fund for these types of projects that come up on an annual basis as needed? If the fire department, police department, or the staff says this is something we really need, we at least have that share of stormwater fund that we can leverage, and we know that's there for resources, training, and other equipment.
And I think that all that would be is just amending the ordinance.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
The funds would just amend that this would be where that would go for it.
Is that still just kind of sitting out there? I think it is. I think we've kind of just let it, yeah, so I mean, I'd be fine with that. I mean, if we'd amend it, we already, it's 80-20 on operations versus projects.
That was basically, yeah, but the ordinance itself, several pages, as the boss is saying, you could amend that to note that the funds could be used for these types of, because it's somewhat specific as to what it says the funds could be used for, so I don't know why this level of specificity couldn't be added.
Sure. It's subject to the board approval, which means they all have to come in front of the board, so you can say, well, why are you spending that? So that doesn't make sense. This is one that, yes, broad-based, so fire wants this, training wants this.
Not to be on the spot, is that something staff would support?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why wouldn't you just build some of this into the budget?
Well, I would build it into the budget. It would, based on where we're at right now, if you would look at cuts to be able to work some of these in, whether the board has an appetite to raise taxes. That's one that I kind of have the direction of 0. But there are a lot of issues that sit out here, and I think specifically it's one that could work its way in, because in the budget there will be a vehicle that police will put in, because we do not have access for emergency access to get back on our trail network, our trail system. Skunk Hollow trails, those are one that you cannot get anything back there to rescue someone if they are injured or hurt. We're building more trails, and we don't have those opportunities to get in some of these areas, so that would be one that you will see in the capital budget.
We're still compiling the costs from the damage of that storm at this point. Commissioner Abel knows about the South Devon Avenue Bridge. We have the Roberts Road culvert. We have several others that were Earls Lane culvert. So these are piling up, as we get the design and the pricing from our emergency contractors to do. So that's going to affect things too. These are sizable projects.
What we can do to address your question is we could prepare something to say, here's what worked together here, to say, here's what we think that we could use. The board can say, okay, here's some things that we heard that we would like to see in there. Now you've got one item to say, okay, does this fit itself in there as a priority? Because there's always different ones to say, this is nice, but this is really a priority. Does it work itself in the budget, or does it work within the stormwater fund? So this way that the board can say, okay, it's only 20,000, we'll make it part of the budget, but if we get into where it's going to be 100+ thousand, well then where's the best use of that for the biggest impact? Because during some of these storms, we've seen North Wayne, South Wayne get hit. You got other areas in the township doesn't get much water, and then sometimes it's all over. So it's different areas that we're seeing different impacts. And I think even in this last storm, there was water in areas impacting homes and property that was never there before. So that's why I know, like Steve and myself and Steve, as we're looking at these, trying to find out what has changed. People putting sheds up in their yard, changing the grading that township's not aware of, that is now rerouted water development, construction. I know the board really watches stormwater management, and any new projects should not make things worse.
Shouldn't these emergency management ideas be, I guess, should we do this in conjunction with what is suggested for our stormwater management projects? We have a lot of money in the budget now, and I think everyone wants a piece of it, and then before you know, we'll either have twice as much because no one will do anything, or everything's earmarked and we'll have a deficit of $2 million or whatever because everyone has their projects. So what's the best way to so everyone is on the same page when it comes with our engineers, because we're paying a lot of money. I don't know what the cost is to look at some of these projects.
Well, I'm going to stay away from stormwater because that's another meeting, 3 hours that we can.
No,
go on
it
for.
is, but if we are using these funds for this, and I'm not saying that one's more important than the other, I'm just saying there's finite resources and there's a lot of projects. That's all I'm saying, and that's what I'm saying, the low budget stuff is great first, and then add on after seeing what's working, what's not working, then you invest more in what's working. I think it's great to open up parking lots. And it's great to get text, and if you're able to move your car, that's fine. But the truth is it's kind of Russian roulette whether your car should be down there in the first place. So for instance, on Poplar, because if you have those, like I said, I don't know what the response time is. If you're out, you got to drive home to move one car, but you drove there. I mean, how do you move 2 cars essentially in a short period of time? So maybe you can't allow parking there. I'm not saying that's the case because the neighbors don't want to hear that, but there's a lot of little factors and nuances that I don't know if we all know, and that's all I'm.
I mean, you can't plan for every storm. So a flash flood, you're probably not moving your vehicles and pre-positioning them. But as Bob worked and pushed forward, when you know a storm's coming 3 or 4 days from now, you open up North Wayne Lot, and I mean, they blasted to everybody. People knew that North Wayne Lot was open.
And one of the things that we're going to work on now is for residents in these areas to try to get them an emergency hang tag for their vehicle. So this way then they would have it, so if they go, they actually just put the hand tag on. So if they want to park in the North Wayne lot, the AT&T lot, or wherever they want to go, if it's, they want to go up and park in Clement because they think in some of the areas it's low, you could put this hand tag on in your car window, and now you will actually see it that, okay, this car, they're in advance or something just happened, they just put that on, and then we know who's got the tags, what the areas are, and again, that part of trying to get the key information from people to try to register so we can get this information out.
And Commissioner Farley, to your question, so when staff presents the budget to you, so last year we had a 5-year capital plan, and we always know that capital plan is fluid as different projects take precedent or emergencies occur. So the budget of the stormwater fund, when it comes to you for the 5-year plan, is going to be sans, the contracts we've already have purchase orders for the stormwater management projects and the emergency projects. And then, like I say, it is a fluid document. We know it can change, and you have that ability to move those chess pieces or push them back and mix and match to make work what so pleases the board and basically makes our residents happy to best address these things.
I guess what I'm talking about is maybe taking that list you're talking about, and instead of having one fluid list, having 2 columns. One projects, which are fluid, and then the other are fluid. If we carve out 25% of the stormwater fund for equipment and training, that would be the second column.
And that could be, what I'm saying is that could be 1 column. It can be all 1 year, multi-year, so it was like I worked with the superintendent when he was lieutenant, and we were looking at his 5-year plan for vehicles. And you can do that just like on all the items the RFC's brought up. Future vehicles, future equipment, training, that can all be addressed.
Having the support of the board is key. You're open to the dialogue, and they have to consider these things is key. And just, it is what it is. You deal with it. Because being out in storms with these folks over the years, it's absolutely incredible to see how they work and operations go along.
Chip Layfield, I would generally side with Sean on trying to do things low cost, no cost for the township. But with public safety, seriously, that's like your main mission. I don't think that is the place to cut costs at all. And it would be great if the commissioners and the managers would formalize this into a working group, tasked to come back with real recommendations. And it seems like everybody here is a miser. Everyone has an eye on the budget. I don't see people with big ticket items. I think you've got a lot of support with the community, And fundamentally, it's something you can do now, because these projects, the stormwater projects, are going to take years to take place, and then maybe years before you even see if they work or not. But this is something people can see you work and see that you care about and what they're doing. I think from my experience of this last storm, the greatest vulnerability was if it had come like an hour later. Think of all the kids, like in buses and going to school, standing on the corner. So that communication with the school seems like that's a critical piece, particularly water actually penetrated into the middle school and the admin building this last time. So I do think the school district, if you do create a formal working group, I think that the school district should be a key part of that. And we also have, and maybe too many, but we have quite a few neighborhood associations, which I think would be happy to get involved. And they could task members or groups of members to focus on this issue, identify areas. And if we could put these flood sites that you all know through personal history into a GIS system and onto a map so that the public could see where they are and know to avoid them, that might be helpful as well. But I'm really thrilled that it's in the hands of professionals, and I think go for it. Seems like a good idea. One last thing. It's unfortunately in the mind of the public, there's a kind of a mixing between stormwater and flooding. And the strategies for stormwater management are totally different, well, pretty much different than they are for flooding. You know, in flooding, you build in resilience, you try to move things out of the way of the flood water. And then we're lucky here because the water, we're relatively high on the table, so the water drains relatively quickly, unlike Darby or someplace. So it's really a matter of getting things out of the way of the water, being resilient, and moving forward. Stormwater management is more of a kind of a quality of life. There are safety issues, but not like flooding. Flooding is, and like we experienced throughout the township, it's vast and unique, but really needs specific training and equipment. And I'm thrilled you guys are doing it. It's great. Thanks, Chip.
Chip touched on my last area that I wanted to focus on, and that's the coordination with the school district. That resident on September 20th who talked about had school been in session and the kids were at the bus stop, they would have been washed away. What do we have in place in terms of coordination with the school district? So if there is a flash flood, buses are not going out, kids are not being dropped off. Does it require that kids have to stay in school an hour later if there's a potential for flooding in the area?
So when Mr. Zinkowski came, we started building relationships outside of the township, and fire company is really what we consider inside part of our team, but the school districts and the colleges in particular were significantly brought in. Sort of the recent storm that came in, the name is slipping my mind, but the recent storm that came in, Mr. Zinkowski had a meeting organized with all of the schools to ensure communication. Sergeant Smith was tasked with talking with everybody at this table, but the school districts were going to come in and go over those planning. RTSD, or the Transportation Garage, worked very well with us. There was a couple of years ago that a winter storm hit during the school year unsuspected, and schools had to stay open till almost 8 o'clock till roads were safe. They were either transported back by bus, or parents were eventually able to make it, for an example, from the city back here, get their car, and go pick up their child. So we are advanced with our relationship with all the schools, and it's important to note that we have several private schools that are all invited to the table. We get this information out, even if we have to hand deliver it. Obviously, we always use email instantaneously, but just to ensure that there's a double backup. So we work very closely with them. Decisions for respective schools sometimes vary. Some schools are overprotective, and that's their right. So we make recommendations based on what we see as best information. They may use a different weather source and say we're canceling school, but that's an individual decision, but it's coordinated through our system. During some of the bigger storms that we've had in the past, we even handed out our TAC radios, which they can call in. Only one person, because it is a public safety tool, so we do go above and beyond with the schools.
Any other public comment?
One other thing I would say is we just turned in, Bryn Fire Company just turned in a list of stuff to our board to make purchases because of the problems we've had on Coniston Road.
Okay.
Okay. Like $1,500, and they're going to into next year's budget to make the purchases.
Okay. And what are those exactly?
Rope bags,
Okay.
75-foot rope bags. We've been using our life safety rope bags. Now I have an assistant chief who's Swiftwater trained, and he's recommending buy 5 for each of our trucks, and we're going to purchase them.
Thank you.
When we get together with the budget, we'll make sure that we reach out and collect everybody's data, just so that they're aware.
That's a good idea. All right. Jake?
I'm good. I appreciate everybody coming tonight.
I'm sorry, you did.
Oh, no, one of the things that I just wanted to touch on earlier, I've obviously lived in Radnor.
Just state your name.
My name's Jenny McGuire. I've lived in Radnor my entire life. My dad used to be the township manager here. I've watched a lot for a long, long time. And the one thing I wanted to talk about was the Public Works Department. When I was young, we probably had triple, if not quadruple, the manpower. I think it would be hard if that storm had come in the middle of the night. If it had been, I think it would have been so hard. I watched the Public Works guys, stand at manholes that were blowing off like geysers, trying to block roads with dump trucks. I don't know that there's enough people to do, unless you tripled your manpower with Public Works, which obviously I don't think you want to do.
I would love to.
So would I. I think they're stretched so thin right now that I think that's almost unrealistic. To think that, I mean, I watch them on my street jump ahead and try to clean out, the manholes and the storm drains. I just think there's too much for the manpower on top of doing what they need to do.
So, my whole point is, and I have residents that will shoot, I have one in particular, she'll shoot me a text, say, hey, this is clogged, can you, and all I'm saying is that if they can they take their gloves, grab
Right.
what they can grab, just make a note, and
Right.
get to it. So if we do have a warning or 4 or 5 days of a big
Yeah,
storm coming,
if we had that
then, look, we're not, the flash floods, no.
Right.
But, hey, we know that Hurricane Florence is coming, or Hurricane Isaac is coming, etc. And we have 3 or 4 days, that's just something that we can add to the checklist.
Right.
I'm not saying it's perfect. I mean, this is not an
But
exact scientist.
could she just pick up leaves and
Yeah, I
debris?
agree with that point, too.
Well, some of that, on Conestoga, I mean.
I lived on Conestoga Road.
In snowstorms, we ask the residents to shovel out their hydrants because we can't get to everyone, but why can't the residents help themselves as well?
Right.
I do the same thing. I'll go over and help some of the neighbors that are around. You can help yourself a lot better than we rely on the township.
Some of
we
them
rely
are
on
elderly
we rely on the township for too much. The people can certainly help themselves, and that's what they also need to understand.
And that was my point. People, they expect services, and you don't want it to raise their taxes. It's such a tough call. But I can't, the Public Works Department around here, in my estimation, I tell my neighborhood all the time, if you didn't have leaf pickup, if you didn't have trash pickup, if you didn't have snow, there isn't anybody around here that wouldn't admit that our snow plowing is better than any township or county around here. And I just think it's funny that some of these, I would be happy to go out. I rake mine, I would do mine around my neighborhood.
No, our public works are great. That's why we don't want to outsource anything,
Correct.
including our trash.
Right,
Okay.
right.
I'm a big proponent of that. All I'm saying is that if you can add this to a checklist, and you have a checklist of whatever the emergencies, hey, if you see it,
Yeah,
and you
if
let
you
people
can-
know, just educating people, and yeah, and if it's not a busy street and they could do it themselves, I just thought one on
Right.
Conestoga was a pretty tight area.
Right.
And if you can do it yourself, let them know. I'll put that on my social media. I'm sure Jake or Luke would be happy to as well. It's just the little things that are incremental that can make all the difference in the
Right.
the world. And if you can snake a drain or a stormwater sewage, that's the stuff that you have to do later. But I get it. I mean, you have to, and that's my whole point about
Right.
this. These are all great ideas. We have to come together and pick and choose how we want to spend our,
Right.
our finite resources, our human capital, our monetary capital, et cetera. And that's just, and this is great. This is the start. This is the start of a great conversation.
I'd be happy to, like Chip,
yeah,
I'd be happy to
I just
spend
want
my
to bring
money.
everything out there so
Right.
we can say, hey, this is the easy stuff. This is the hard
Right.
stuff, and go from there.
I would
That's it.
I would just want to say too, I would be happy to see my stormwater money, like as Chip would, go to things like this.
possibility.
Yeah,
Sick.
appreciate it.
All right. Radnor PD, anything else?
No, sir.
No? Staff?
On the inlets, we do go out prior to the storms all the time.
Yeah.
Conestoga Road's a state road,
Mhm.
but if we see an issue, the big beehive there, we will clean it. And Steve started that when he came over, so we're always proactive on that before the storms.
Bob, I saw it on your checklist.
And honestly, so in a storm, I'm not going to speak for my colleague, the guys clean the inlets, but with every surge that comes down the street, those inlets get clogged again. If it's not leaves, it's cut grass, it's debris. They go clean them, and then the next downpour comes, and it's a very much a Sisyphean task to keep up with that.
To meet the MS4 requirements, we open every one on the township roads every year. We clean them out because we have to document how much debris we get, and then we generate a repair list to fix them, and then in the spring we fix the inlets. So, and we keep track of it on a map.
Steve, one question for you. How about the private entity, like the Radnor Valley Country Club and things like that, where they throw the debris in the water basin?
Yeah.
Is there any way to address that?
We have to catch them doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you see they go up there with tree branches and stuff like
Right,
that,
right.
which in turn is going to back up the road, the water to Sproul
Yeah.
Road.
And does PennDOT have any kind of system for that you know of?
No.
No.
Very rare that they come out and clean them.
Yeah.
We'll call and request it.
All right, fair enough. So if a resident, because I've had this, and Lisa knows, and I'm sure staff knows, so the best resource at this point, I guess, is to call your state representative or state senator.
For the state roads,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Radnor Fire.
And I'd just like to strongly recommend that the board look at the public safety of the first responders and the firefighters and the police officers when we talk about the training and equipment, because we put them in the water. If we get somewhere and somebody needs to be rescued, we'll put our guys in the water reluctantly, without all the equipment that they should have. But we're not going to turn somebody down. But I'm a little disappointed that I hear some, kickback that we're not kickback, but maybe some resistance to spending the money on some of the things that I think is a short-term solution to some of the issues that are going on in the township. As somebody else said, it's going to take a long time to see the stormwater issues resolved. We're not going to see that in the next 6 months or a year, but we can spend this money and we can get the first responders much more better equipped and safer in a very short period of time. And I think that should be the priority.
Well, I think as part of the budget discussions, we should have basically what you said tonight, the list of what we need, how much it costs, and I think that's something we need to consider. I can only speak for myself. I have no problem spending money on these things. There's 6 other people, and we do have to be fiduciaries of the township at the same time. So, but I don't think anybody disagrees now that we need to spend money on this. So it's just we have to figure it out. So that's our job.
I just want to add that we have to support our first responders as well, without a doubt. It's easier to see it if you can see it on paper. That's the easiest thing for us. So get it to us and put it in the budget, and we'll get you what you need.
Joe, where would you get a boat if you needed one?
We either have to go to Gladwin, and they have enough issues down there themselves, which the
Yeah.
superintendent can attest to.
That's where I'm lucky. I could have Gladwin in about 2 minutes.
George
Where would
Clay.
you get Clay is where you get a boat?
In the next one.
And then Westchester.
Or Sweetsboro.
And then Westchester. But the problem is, if we're having that problem, most of those people, especially
Right, exactly.
Gladwin and George Clay being right on the river, their resources are going to be already taken up.
I could bring mine out of Summers Point if we wanted to.
Well, just to touch on that, I worked at Longwood full-time up until about a month ago, and I was working the day of the floods up here. I got relocated on a boat crew from southern Chester County to one of the middle schools in Tredyffrin. That's a 40-minute ride because Tredyffrin was getting hammered so badly. So this isn't just us. This is certainly a regional issue that we can't pull other resources. If we pull them, they have nothing. So we're trying to almost be self-sufficient. And one other topic I just like to, most of the people we put in this water are volunteers. So you're saving a ton of money to begin with anyway. If we had to staff a fully paid fire department, you'd be looking at something very close to the police budget. So I just want to remind you that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, if Jake and Sean, unless you have anything else, the public, if anybody has anything to say. Sure.
I just want to reiterate again that the issue with the stormwater is that you have to convey it, you have to contain it, you hopefully can perk it or, push it down in the stream. But when you have a flood like this, there's nowhere to put that water. The streams are full, your containment's full. This is going to happen regardless if we spend $1 billion on stormwater management. This is a separate issue, and I think what Jake's talking about building that resilience in and building systems that are there to protect us makes a lot of sense.
That's right.
All right. If there's anything else? All right.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.